All right, so plan here is to do a demo of that focuses just on the assembly of the puzzle cube, but I'll do it both for the solid and for the block form. It should essentially be the same. It will look a little different in the browser bar, and I'll point that out when we get to it. But let's just go ahead and start. So you're going to start by creating a new assembly from the default type. And if you need to choose a good one to start with, first of all, make sure that you have settings, tools, application options, the assembly settings, and turn on this one, place and ground first component at origin. What that does is when you choose the first thing you want to bring into the assembly, it will lock it in place. It will give you one and it will lock it in place. Okay, so choosing a good one, I recommend starting at the bottom. So I know this is an assembly and inventor, but assuming this was what my yellow sheet looked like when I colored it, I'm going to start with the green piece, because then that one will be locked in place, and then I'll bring in the gray piece, lock it to that, bring in the pink piece, lock it to those two, and don't bring in the extra pieces until you have whatever you have already brought in constrained. So I'm going to start with my new assembly by placing, let's see here, it's probably called green block, green, it's one of these, new center, there we go, okay. And because I have that setting on, I don't even click, it just gives me one, and it gives me a, well, it's represented here in the browser bar, but you can see here that little push pin, that means it's grounded, and I can just hit right click OK. I don't want another green one. Let's bring in the next one. I'll do place, and let's do, I don't know why these are called new center, but there we go. And when you bring one in, the second one, you do have to click to set it, and then you can hit right click OK. And at this point, you can use free rotate on this piece until you put a constraint on it. It's not a bad idea to use free rotate to sort of get it pointed the right direction to help you solve some of the issues. But once you start constraining it, using free rotate on the piece will break it. If you can figure it out in your head, like what goes where, you can do it and just use the constraints to flip things around. But where we are now, this is fine. Okay, so it kind of goes right about there. Let's go ahead and open up the constraint tool. And everything's going to be a mate constraint. It's either going to be a mate or flush, which are the first and second types. If the two faces need to be touching or lined up, I'm going to use mate. So I'm going to mate that face to that face. Hit OK. And I only have one constraint, so it still moves around. But if I look at it from that direction, it's locked on that. No matter where I drag it up or down, it's locked on that face. Okay, so I need a second one. Let's constrain it from moving this direction. So I'm going to flush the two faces that point this way. So switch it to flush, and I'll do this one, and hit OK. And now that I have two constraints, it only will move in one direction. And so now we need one more constraint to lock it in. I can either mate this face underneath to this face right here, or I can flush the two faces on this side. And that's what I'm going to do just because I can see them at the same time. So I'm going to flush and flush, hit OK. When I'm done, I should be able to grab anything in the assembly, and none of it should move because it's fully constrained. That's when you bring in next piece. I'm going to bring in the pink one, which goes across the bottom. And it slots in sort of around this way, which No. Don't I have a good example? I guess I don't have an example of. Stop. Okay, but either way, I could do free rotate to line it up, but I can figure out, I know that the short end that sticks out needs to be mated to this part of the green. So I'm going to just leave it on mate. I'm going to mate that face to that face and hit OK. And what else do I know? Well, all that does is constrain it from going this direction. I know I need to constrain it from going up and down. So I'm going to flush the bottom of the pink piece to the bottom of, and it can be either one, since this face and this face are lined up perfectly. I'm going to do flush of the bottom of the pink face, the pink piece, the bottom face, to either one of these. It doesn't have to be the one right next to it. And now it should only move this direction, and I'm just going to flush these two faces here. And we'll do flush this to this, hit OK, and you know you're done if you can grab it. Okay, I just reminded myself of something that you may have an issue with, because when we did the mini train, if you have predict, offset, and orientation selected before you do your constraints, well, depending, it may ruin things. So before you choose anything, make sure this is off. Because you could see it put in an offset, but I don't want an offset for that because that's where the piece was when I chose flush. So make sure this is off before you do anything. Okay, this one's a little trickier. So I'm going to use free rotate. It goes sort of like that. And kind of up in this type of area. So let's go ahead and get through this flush there to there. Hit apply. You don't have to hit OK. If you know what your next one is right away, you can just hit apply and move on. But I do recommend once you have two to hit OK and see what the third one is. Constrain, and let's just flush the top of this to the top of this. And even though they're not touching, they can still be flush. You can see how we know we want them to line up exactly, the top of the orange to the top of the green. So we'll just use flush, and there you go. And now everything I can grab, or nothing can move. And the last one, for me at least, was the blue. And this one, again, is kind of complicated. These pieces where they sort of, some of these are very easy to make mirrors of. Like this blue one, it would be very easy to make the exact same thing, but with the one that sticks out the other direction. And this is a point where you will find out if that's the case. Okay, I know that the sort of end face of the short part needs to be sort of notched in on top of there. So I'm going to start with that. Let's go ahead and mate that to here. Hit OK. And I know it needs to be sort of twisted so that this part that sticks out here fits in this notch. So I'm going to do a flush of this face to anything over here. Hit OK. And then it only moves this direction. So I'm just going to go ahead and flush this side of the side from here to here. Hit OK. And there you go. That is one full assembly for this. I don't really need to show the other block assembly. Once you've made the pieces out of blocks, you have those as assemblies. Okay, so each of your pieces, if you're doing the separate block method, each piece is its own assembly. And then when you get to the point of assembling them, when you go to place component, you're going to place the assembly. Okay, and that's why it in the browser bar, all of the features, excuse me, all the components are assemblies. You can see those little blocks, as opposed to a regular assembly where all of the components are part files. But it works out the same. It's just an assembly of assemblies. And you do everything the same way with, flushing faces and flush mate. So every new piece that comes in is going to get 3 either flush or mate. It's going to be like mate flush or mate flush mate or some combination in order to constrain it in all 3 dimensions. Okay, and that's where we will end this now. We'll do the presentation exploded view thing next. All right, so give me a second, I'll post that up.